Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Business Vision and the Business Health Workshop number 8. And today's session is slightly different subject to normal. It's how to ramp up your business using Xero bookkeeping software. So, welcome. Many of these sessions took place last year, so they're all recorded and you can find them on YouTube. And if you want to show this one to anybody else, it will also be recorded and uploaded within about a week. So let's just go through how GoToWebinar works. So for those of you who haven't used GoToWebinar before, there's a little orange button that will be beside your panel, and that will open up the panel. From there, you'll be able to select your audio features and so on. There is no workbook today because most of this isn't slides, it's me going through the software. And if you've got any questions, please type them in the question section, because at the end we will hopefully have 5 or 10 minutes just to go through and answer those. I suspect because it's Xero subject, there may be more questions than when I do business growth webinars. So I will let you know an email address at the end, where if we don't get time to do all the questions and answer them, or if you don't feel comfortable asking questions through GoToWebinar, then we can deal with them outside the webinar in due course. Okay, so what we're going to go through today, in a minute, I'll just introduce myself and our company Business Vision, and also tell you a little bit about what Xero is if you're not familiar with it. And then we're going to go in to the actual Xero software and show you how Xero can help your business grow. We'll show you how Xero can help you get paid quicker. Some saving time tips. So there are quite a few things that Xero now allows you to do that will be neat little tricks that save time. A lot of people don't know them, so we'll go through a few of those. We go through a few things that we as accountants are able to use Xero for, that we are using with many of our clients, and just show you what's possible there. And then we'll go through the Xero app section, just show you what else can link into Xero. And then at the end of it, as always, we'll try and give you some ideas of what the next steps are. And then I say at the end, depending on how much time I take going through the software, we'll have hopefully 5 or 10 minutes for some Q&A. So just as an introduction, what we're finding with Xero or bookkeeping generally is that a lot of business owners, unless they're actually doing the bookkeeping, and even sometimes when they are just allowing that to be used by bookkeepers or us as their accountants, and are often saying, we don't really understand what Xero's telling me. And worse still, they may be setting up their own systems to produce data outside Xero simply because they can't get what they need. And I think the reality is that Xero can be used as a business hub to get most of what you need to run a successful business. So hopefully we'll give you a flavour of that today. We obviously won't be able to cover all the areas, but hopefully we'll get you going on the basics. So little thought of the day that we always start with, and this is by Steve Jobs, who used to run Apple. Computers themselves and software yet to be developed will revolutionize the way we learn. Now that was obviously a quote from a few years back, but even more relevant today. Things are moving quickly in a pace, and hopefully you'll get a flavour of what online computer systems can now do, especially with regard to bookkeeping and accounting and just running a business generally. And just to give you a couple of flavours as to where this might be going, for people of my generation might be a bit scary of the pace of it, but it's happening regardless. So for example, it won't be too long before buses have computer or video screens on the side of the bus for advertising, which isn't a great shock. But what's probably more relevant to the future is that when buses pull up to bus stops or at traffic lights, they'll be able to interrogate data of the people beside the bus at the bus stop and their phones, and the adverts that will appear will be specifically geared to what they think is best suited for that client base, and that will obviously change from stop to stop. So that type of marketing facility using computers and data held on mobile phones is quite dramatic. As far as Xero goes, one of the things that they're aiming to do with artificial intelligence, and it won't be too long, I don't think, is they will have millions of businesses entering data, every day into Xero. And what they hope to do is to systemize it even further. So when you're entering some details from your bank feed, Xero will be able to actually prompt you or even do the work for you based on where millions of other people are putting it. So if it says a business name, or we know where that direct debit's gone to, Xero will be able to tell you where they think that should go rather than you telling Xero, because they'll already have that data held in millions of computers around the world. So if it comes up, for example, with a direct debit paid to Business Vision, they'll know enough eventually to be able to say that should go to accountancy. So that sort of thing is the way that this is going to develop, and I think that will only get more dramatic as time goes by. Okay, so just a little introduction. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mark Lawson. I run an accountancy practice called Business Vision in Plymouth, and our main aim, we do obviously the normal work that accountants do. We prepare accounts, we do bookkeeping, payroll, and so on. But my main aim within the practice is to help businesses grow, to improve profitability and cash flow, and probably more importantly, to do that and at the same time allow business owners to have more fun and spend less hours achieving it. So that's us. Many of you will know that already. Xero is obviously now by far and away the leading bookkeeping software in the UK, and started out surprisingly, because most people think it came from the States. It started out in New Zealand, then moved across to Australia, and then effectively came across to the UK, and will try and dominate the United States, probably last in that scale, but they're also in many other countries, South Africa, many European countries, and so on. And the use of Xero in the UK is actually more businesses use Xero than use all other bookkeeping software put together. So many years ago, Sage used to be the go-to software. That's now, I think, third in the UK. QuickBooks, which is an American company, is now second and has come on leaps and bounds since Xero came on board. And the benefit, I think, of Xero is that it was able to reinvent itself from the ground up using modern open platform internet procedures, whereas obviously QuickBooks and Sage were built on old school PC-based programs, and it's harder for them to develop. So I think Xero was able to redefine what bookkeeping and accountancy software is all about. So in a minute, I'll go into Xero Demo Client, and that's basically a dummy client that you can have within your Xero, and you can go in there, and it's a very useful tool to be able to play around. I use it for demonstration purposes, but you can use it to train or just to play around with stuff and see what happens without actually affecting your own real live data. I did have a big decision to make doing this webinar as to whether I presented you with screenshots of Xero, which will probably make this webinar a little bit less fraught from my point of view, but I have decided to use live software so that you can see from hopefully the mouse, you can see where I'm pointing and where we're going, give you a little bit more flavour, but that obviously does come with the potential for IT niggles and problems as we go along, so hopefully we won't get any of those. It's important to note that this is not going to train you on accounting and understanding accounts particularly. That we did in a webinar I think towards the end of 2021, so that will already be up in YouTube, and that's worth revisiting as a supplement to today. And it's also not going to be a how to use Xero webinar either. This isn't a training module on how to use Xero particularly. It's about how to use Xero to get the best out of your business. So we do have a training program to train people and your team on Xero, and we can even use that to supplement what they already know. You might find there's many things today that you weren't aware of, but that's not the main aim today. That is software training, which we do as well. And we'll also hopefully give you some practical tips to help your business grow and how to use Xero in that process. So I'll now just dive in to Xero. And as I say, hopefully you can see my mouse, which hopefully won't be too intrusive into the screen, but I thought that would help you a little bit to see maybe on a small screen your end where I'm actually moving around within the program. So as I said, I'm not going to comprehensively cover everything, but I'm going to go into a few areas that might help you as a business owner, or if you're helping a business owner, to help you help them. So the first thing to realize, I say, is this is a demo company, so none of this is real, and you have access to this as well. And the big benefit is that pretty much anything that could go on in Xero is in the demo company. So it doesn't allow me to show you everything, whereas your business may not have all these things running at this stage. So probably the first thing we need to think about is, where does a business owner go to get some financial information? It worries me enormously when business owners get that from some outside source when it's already available within Xero. So the obvious ones will be under the accounting tab, and typically the two main reports that you'll get, which you get from your accountants or your bookkeeper on a regular basis, which I think are the basic go-to ones, are balance sheet and profit and loss. Now, I won't explain what those do. As I say, the previous webinar did that, but I'll just go into profit and loss. And I say, because I'm going live, there will be slight delays on getting each screen to come up, so apologies for that. But profit and loss will hopefully be vaguely familiar to you, so you are able to see all the profit figures for any period. You can change the periods up here, you can compare it with previous months and so on. But what you can do, which is probably more important, is get a 3D version of your business. So typically businesses have what's called a chart of accounts, which is really this list you can see here. So it's a list of where everything goes within your Xero, and we call that chart of accounts. But that really only gives you a two-dimensional report. So you've got across the top, you've got various time modes, so years or months, and down the left you've got various headings. But what businesses often want to learn is a bit more, what I call a 3D dimension. So what you can do, and Demo has this set up, is you can actually track this type of report on a third dimension, and you can choose what that dimension is. So within Demo, it's using it to track different departments. So Demo has North, East, South and West as effectively branches. And what that allows you to do is to see how each department's doing by looking at the profit for each department. So we can do that at the top by looking at filter and just going, let's click East. And we then basically will get the figures. Just click update. We'll get the figures for just the East department. So we can now see how that department's doing on its own. And that can be very useful for businesses. I do see businesses where, to try and achieve that, they have multiple lists in their chart of accounts, which isn't the best way to do it. So they might have mileage Jim, mileage Bob, mileage Jane, and they might have 20 different mileage codes, and they might have 100 sales codes. The problem with that is that doesn't tell you enough, and you have to trawl through an awful lot of data to get what you need, whereas this gives you profit and loss for East, and I can select any of the other departments. So just very quickly, just to show you how that is achieved, I'll show you where you go to set that up. But obviously, in order for Xero to know what data applies to each department, whenever you make an entry, so if I just click on this one, once you've got those extra three-dimensional things set up, every time you enter something, then there is a different element to basically enter, and that will be seen on any entry screen. So this is an entry screen for an invoice, and you can see there, as well as selecting the sales code or any other code you want to use in the chart of accounts and the VAT rate, you've actually got the drop down list to say which department. Obviously, if you don't say which department it is, you're not going to get accurate data. But for reasonably medium to large businesses, that can be hugely useful in terms of finding out how a basic business-wide profit and loss can be broken down. And there are actually, if you really wanted to, there are two types of, we call this tracking. There are two trackings that you can add. Demo company's only got one, which is the region, the branch, but you could have another one. So you could actually have two columns there, and that might be, let's say, salesmen. So you could have regions, departments, and you could then have another one for salesmen where all your salespeople are listed. And then when you enter data, you'd not only say which reason, but you'd say which salesperson achieved that sale. And that would allow you to get reports that tell you how much sales did the East department do that came from salesman Bob. And that for some businesses can be really useful. Bearing in mind that to use that, you have to put in more data. So only use it if it's going to be important to you. But I do see people trying to get that with spreadsheets and all sorts of stuff. It's ready and already there. So that's what we call tracking, which allows you a sort of 3D or maybe even 4D, four-dimensional breaking down of your data figures. So profit and loss and balance sheet, won't go into those in great detail, but that's what your accountant provides you at the end of the year, and they're available in reports within Xero. Another thing that you might find useful, which accountants don't always provide, we tend to, is basically what we call a cash flow report. And that basically says, where did the money go? Because we often get asked when we say, oh, you've made £100,000 profit, a business owner will go, well, that can't be right, because where did it go? I've only got £5,000 in the bank. Well, the answer is, and you'll see this in previous webinars that we've done, profit is never going to be the same as cash flow. So this little report called Cash Summary will actually show you how the cash has gone in and out. So what you'll get at the end is the opening cash or bank balance for the period, the closing balance, and then a summary of how you got from A to B. And that can be more important than your profit and loss sometimes, because most businesses don't necessarily fail through lack of profit, they fail through lack of cash. And many big failures have had decent profit figures shown, but didn't have the right cash flow. So that cash flow report can be a useful supplement to the normal ones. Something else that's in Xero under the business tab is something called Business Snapshot, and that will contain some of the sort of basic accounting numbers you need to know that hopefully your accountant will provide periodically anyway, but this is available on a day-to-day basis. So that will show you things like profitability for a period. It will show you how your income and expenditure is going. It will show you your gross profit margin. That's how much you make on just buying and selling whatever it is you're doing. It will show you your top overheads. It will show you your balance sheet in a layman's term. It will show you how long it's taking to get paid on average and how long you're taking to get paid, and so on. So quite a lot of useful little information in there. I think most businesses of any reasonable size will need more than that, but that's certainly a starting point to look at from time to time. And another thing that's within that section, which Xero calls analytics, is its ability to predict where your bank balance is going to go over the next 30 days. So you can apply that to different bank accounts. So if I select the main bank account for demo, we can see there that basically it starts at today's bank balance and it then tries to predict using artificial intelligence where that bank balance is going to be going over the next 30 days. It's not perfect. There is other software that is specifically designed to do this that I think will do it more accurately. But what Xero does is it does tell you how it's making those decisions. So it is actually telling you what it's using to make that. And it's typically going to be things like regular direct debits, regular standing orders, and expected dates of payment that you've put on bills owing, and expected dates of getting paid on bills that are out there to customers. As I say, you have to use that fairly carefully because there's a danger that if you don't check everything that's going into it, it won't necessarily give you the right thing. But that is certainly in there. And as I say, there is other software that will do that in a lot more detail, and it will even allow you to change all the assumptions that the computer's making, so it is an accurate cash flow, and you can use that day to day to see where things are going to go and see whether there's any pain points coming up. The other one that probably business owners ought to be looking at is money owing and money owed. Xero calls those payables and receivables, and I think that is more sensible and more relevant to business owners than the accountancy terminology of debtors and creditors, which I think confuses. So those reports are fairly straightforward. So the receivables report will typically show money owing, and it will show you money owing by how long it's been outstanding. So this first column is everything that's still basically got 30 days to run before from the invoice date. Then you've got anything greater than a month, greater than 2 months, and so on. So as a business owner, if you get that report and you do have money owing to you, you're really looking at the columns on the far right, which are the debts that are becoming older and therefore maybe beyond your terms, hopefully, but also maybe more likely to become bad debts. So the spread of money owing to you across those columns is important, and you really want as much as possible just in the left. Anything that gets old should be collected and in your bank. And you've got the same report for age payables. Exactly the same thing, it's just this is what you owe people. So these are bills that have been put in Xero that you owe, and again, it's got it into periods as to how long since the invoice date and it hasn't been paid. And I think those should be looked at, both of those two reports should be looked at on a monthly basis to check that they're accurate, because the other benefit of reviewing this is it will highlight any potential bookkeeping errors. So if you've got long outstanding invoices, it's possible they have been paid and the payment's been missed within the system. And just on a couple of other financial bits, we did mention in the Accounts Understanding Your Numbers webinar that it is quite important for businesses that have any reasonable stock or work in progress to actually enter those figures on a monthly or quarterly basis. A lot of businesses only tend to let it happen at the year end when accountants get hold of it. But for reasons that the previous webinar explained, if you've got reasonable stock and work in progress figures, then not having those updated means that when you're looking at all the stuff I've just explained, you're not getting an accurate picture. So any sizable stock or work in progress needs to be put in. Not going to go through how now, but if that worries you, you can certainly contact us. And the same goes for timing differences, which accountants call prepayments and pre-receipts. And Xero can deal with those. Again, I'm not going to go through it now, but rest assured that it will deal with those items. So for example, if you pay a year's insurance, Xero has a way of spreading that cost over the 12 months so it looks sensible in your profit and loss. And similarly, if you get paid up front for a sale that you haven't yet even started, so a deposit, Xero has a way of showing that deposit not as profit, but as just money being held until you actually do the work, and you can claim that deposit against the invoice. So all of those technicalities are available in Xero, and again, a decent bookkeeper or accountant can help get those firmed up and particularly accurate. Okay, so let's just look at a few things going on under settings. So settings is on this little drop down menu if you click on your company name. And these usually are dealt with at the beginning, but there's lots of things in there that don't get dealt with and then never looked at again. So we'll just touch on those. Invoice settings, what Xero has is a facility to have any number of layouts for invoices, quotes, statements, etc. So when you first get Xero, there's only one there, which is the Xero template, and you can have as many different versions of the Xero template you like. It's got quite a lot of things you can tweak and change around. But if you really want something different, then you can export that template into Word, Microsoft Word, play around with it, and then bring it back into Xero. So there is one here under Demo Company called Special Projects, and if I get time, I'll show you how that appears later. And you can have as many of those as you want. I wouldn't have thought you'd need more than 2 or 3, but you may have a customer who likes their invoices laid out in a particular way, and that's completely different than the way you normally do it. You can have one specifically designed for them, and the way you would get that to them is when you enter the sales invoice details, there is a drop-down list that says which template for sales do you want to select. You just obviously pick the one that you want at that stage. So all of those can be done within settings, and if you need help with that, I can certainly provide that. There's also a couple of other things under the invoice settings that are really useful. Payment services allows you to collect money by credit card, etc., PayPal, and the logo for the credit card collection company will appear on the invoice. So if you're emailing the invoices, which hopefully is the way that things are going these days, your customer will be able to click on that invoice logo and they will be then redirected to pay you by credit card. So it's a way of getting paid quicker and more efficiently. Obviously, there are very small charges with the providers that Xero use, but they have a number of them. We'll talk about that a bit later. But that allows you to automatically get paid by credit card. You don't need a credit card machine in the office or anything like that. It's just a link on the invoice. You've also got the ability to use Invoice Reminders, which is more to do with getting paid quickly. But whilst we're in this screen, I'll show you that as well. And what this does, you need to be a wee bit careful with it, but effectively, once you click on this setup button, it will automatically send out reminders at set stages that you decide on to people with outstanding invoices owing to you. So you don't need to automatically send statements, it's done for you. And you can pick when that happens, and you can also choose the wording. You may not like the standard wording in Xero. You might think it's either a bit too soft or a bit too harsh, but you can change that and you can have any number of different dates. So for example, you could have an email set up, say 7 days before the invoice due date, to go out and politely say, dear customer, just letting you know that you have this payment due in 7 days. We're just checking everything's okay and that payment can be made and that there's no further information you require from us. Something like that, polite, because it's not due yet. And then you can have another one maybe 7 days after, chasing up payment and getting increasingly stroppier as you go further down the road. And you can set that up either globally or you can set it up on a client by client basis, because you may not want every customer getting those. And that's available free, and those just go out automatically. Xero sends them out by email automatically. A couple of warning messages is your Xero needs to be relatively up to date if you're going to use that. So if your bookkeeper's not basically putting through all the bank receipts and apart from every month, then obviously that means at any point in time, this system will be sending out reminders for things that actually have been paid. The bookkeeper just hasn't pushed it through Xero. So that's something to be aware of. And also obviously make sure that the figures are accurate in Xero, because otherwise it will just be chasing up whatever's in Xero. But other than that, it can be a useful facility to speed up the collection procedures and save time, because a lot of the debt collecting processes are then done automatically through Xero. So very useful, but I say it needs to be just approached with a degree of caution. A couple other bits. If we now go to the main dashboard, which is where most people probably can see a fair bit of what they need to see about their business. So you've got each bank account, and obviously the bank feed comes through there telling you whether there's anything to deal with. So Demo has 29 bank feed items still to be dealt with. You've got the facility here to actually watch specific accounts. So rather than go to a report such as your profit and loss account to see what your accountancy costs are in the latest month, you can actually just add it here. I wouldn't suspect you'd want really more than about half a dozen, but typically what we see there for clients is sales. So you can obviously see your sales on an ongoing basis without moving out of dashboard. Possibly director's loan account for companies to see how much the company owes you or you owe the company, and maybe a couple of key costs. They can all be shown. You just click on these little dots here, are really just another menu. So in this particular case, you can click on there and you can then go to the chart of accounts and select the account you want to add and so on. And you can even add budgets. to those headings there. So you could have 5 or 6 key codes with budgets and see exactly how you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So that's that one. Every other bit of information that you need on a basic level is here. So this shows you invoices owing to you. It shows you how many of them are overdue. And as with everything on Xero, you can click on the figure and get taken to a more detailed report. Every bill you owe is here. And again, those that are overdue are highlighted in red. Any expense claims that are owing to staff or whatever can be shown here. And that's again a feature that isn't used too much in Xero. Xero is very good at running expense claims where staff, if they're out and about and incurring parking costs or coffee breaks or whatever, they can just use their Xero app on their phone, which is free, doesn't allow them to see your Xero data, but they can take a picture of the receipt that goes straight in as an expense claim. You can then approve it, and then Xero shows that you owe that money to that member of staff, and that can work really efficiently within there. The other things you've got, payroll. Obviously, most people know that Xero does payroll. I have to say that because Xero only started payroll, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, there are probably 1 or 2 better payroll softwares out there. So I wouldn't necessarily say that Xero is the best. It does pretty much everything you want payroll to do. But as I say, I wouldn't say it's the bee's knees in the same way that the bookkeeping is. You've also got the ability, it is an add-on, so this does cost extra, but you've got the ability to run projects. So if you wanted to see, as well as, let's say, North, East, South, West, and how each department's doing, you can actually see how each job's going or how each type of job's going. And all that happens there is that when you're putting sales invoices on or timesheets or bills, you can allocate them all to a project, and then you can find out exactly how much profit you made on that project. I think it's £5 a month as an add-on. Obviously, with all of, with all of these things, there will be a little bit of extra time to put the data in. But if you really just need a very basic, are we making money on it? So let's say you're a double glazing firm and you want to know how each double glazing job has panned out. Did it turn out according to the quote, which can be saved in projects? Did it make money? If it didn't, which area was out? That can all be done. You probably wouldn't want to do that with thousands of projects. I say if that's the case and you want to monitor them, there are, I say, other project management softwares that can link to Xero, which probably do a more thorough job. There's a basic project evaluation program that works really well. Okay, a couple of bits on the bank. I'm assuming that if anybody's using Xero or they have bookkeepers using it, the whole issue of getting items through the bank feed and then dealing with it is fairly well known, because that's really the starting point from Xero. And that, compared to the old softwares, is still going to save a huge amount of time. Xero does try and pick out what things coming from your bank might be doing. So here you can see that the bank says that some money's come in for £6,187.50, and it's saying you've got an outstanding invoice on Xero for the same amount. Is that money paying off that invoice? And if you're happy it is, you click OK, job done. So that's very quick and easy, and Xero will try and suggest those things wherever possible, and they are tweaking the algorithm monthly to try and make that even more perfect as time goes on. I would suggest a degree of caution there is that I think once bookkeepers or business owners get used to that, there can be a little bit too much just clicking every OK without checking whether it is the right thing. So you still need a few seconds just to check in that instance that payment is paying off that bill before you just click OK, because there's a temptation just to go through and click OK. One of the things that can save time with the bank feed, which will make the recognition even more perfect than Xero suggestions, is something called bank rules. Now, you'll see here that this one has already come up with the fact that there's a bank rule in place. And effectively what it's doing is you're entering once, you only need to do this once, you're entering some criteria for Xero to look at in the bank feed. And if it finds it, it will do something on the right-hand side here that you've told it to do. So as an example, you could tell Xero to look for the words business vision in the wording. And if it is business vision, you then say, can you put it to accountancy with the contact name business vision and VAT at 20%. So this tells you that there is recognition of whatever you've set up. And if you're happy that that is what you want done, you click OK. And that would be very useful for things like standing orders and direct debits, because you can just say, if you see something coming in that's this, and you've got multiple variables to tell Xero what to look for, but often it can just be the name, then you can tell it exactly what to do. So there's really, once you've set it up, there's no real work to do apart from looking at it and clicking the OK button. So every time that 7-Eleven thing comes through on the bank feed, it will always come up and say, you've set up a rule telling me what to do with that. Do you want me to do it? And you do that. And I say it works brilliantly. So you could set one up here for central city parking, rather than fill out this stuff on the right, which might take a couple of minutes. You can set that up and say, every time central city parking appears, do this. And the way to get that, there are several ways, but the quickest way is just this little drop down list here. If I can get that to work. Can't at the moment, but that drop down list will effectively give you the option of setting up a bank rule. And I say you only need to do it once, and I would suggest that that's a very good exercise to do for direct debit standing orders and things that come through regularly where they're easy to spot. And that can get rid of probably half your bank feed without really doing much apart from clicking OK. The other thing I would suggest that bookkeepers or business owners do is to look at this little reconciliation report, because with the best will in the world, 999 times out of 1,000, Xero's bank feeds will be the same as on your online bank. But there will be occasions, and I'll be honest, they usually are problems with the bank, not Xero, where there might be a jitter and you might end up getting double or missing some. So what the reconciliation does is it allows you to check at the bottom whether your bank statement figure on your real bank account is identical to Xero's, and if not, you can then investigate why and do something with it. So that's a useful little check. It's something we always do when we do bookkeeping, and it's something we check when we get books to do annual accounts, because if that doesn't work, then it may mean something's missing or duplicated in the bank in Xero. Doesn't happen often, but I think there is a danger that you can assume that as there's a bank feed, Xero will always be in line with your real bank, and occasionally that might not be the case. There are also things that you can do internally to mess that up, so it will also pick that up as well. Okay, let's look at a little bit to do with debt collecting, getting paid. So we've already talked about the ability for Xero to send out reminders or polite emails automatically on your behalf once a certain date trigger has been reached, and that will happen regularly until such time as Xero says that invoice has been paid. There is the ability to actually add quotes, so you can quote within Xero. So you can see here on the toolbar, one of the features Xero has is that you can do the same thing from many different places. So this little plus button just on the main toolbar has the ability to do a lot of the basic stuff. So I can go in here and create a quote. The big benefit of that, because there's the normal data entry to add at that stage, but the big benefit is once that quote's accepted, there is a simple button to click, and that quote will then turn into an invoice at the time that you want to send it to the client without having to re-enter all the details again. So you can still amend them slightly. So if the quote was for 3,000 and the bill eventually is for 3,200, you can still change it, but it saves a lot of the typing and detail entry. So quotes can be done through Xero, and there are very good reports to tell you which quotes have been accepted and which ones haven't. So that's quite useful because getting quotes done and converting them quickly into sales invoices is one way to help speed up the debt collecting process. There's also a very good sales overview section under business. which gives you a lot of detail about exactly what's going on with your sales side. So hopefully that will load. So basic information is you've got a couple of draft invoices there. So they've been created, but they're in draft. So they haven't been sent anywhere yet. And they're not even in your accounting system until you convert them from draft. There's amounts owing, 14,000, and you can click on that and get a list. Of those, there's about 1,000 overdue. And again, you can click into those. But you've also got the ability here to see all the invoices, and within that you can start to do different bits and bobs. So you can start to put notes in there. You can even put in basically when you think the due date might be. So in this top one here, it says the invoice date's 24th of February, the due date's 10th of March, but you might actually have rung the client and they might have agreed with you that they can pay it a couple of weeks later. So you can then change that and just put a little expected date note in, and that will obviously feed through to the cash flow bit that I mentioned earlier. So you'll get a more accurate idea from Xero when that's going to hit your bank, and you can add little notes. So whenever somebody internally is doing some ringing up, all of that can be entered into here, and you can then start to filter that report and get pretty much every bit of information you need to start doing very detailed and accurate debt collecting processes. So again, you can see here that we've ordered it in terms of how late it is. So your debt collector might want to be starting at the bottom with the oldest ones and then gradually working up, or you could sort it by size and start attacking the big ones first, and so on. So sales overview, there's also one for bills, which does effectively very similar job, but those are quite handy little reports to work through. So some time-saving tips. One quick one, doesn't save a lot of time, but it's handy, is if you're creating, let's say, a new sales invoice, and it's coming up with today's date, but if I want to put in a due date, and let's say my terms are 30 days, rather than work out when 30 days is and enter it, I can just type in plus 30 and Xero does that automatically for me. So that's quite useful. Another thing you can do is if I put in the name of the customer, a line comes up that says, do you want to add the items that were entered in the customer's last invoice? So if you're putting very similar or identical wording in, and maybe even prices, you can just copy what you did last time for that customer. Might save a bit of time in terms of typing it all in again. Having said that, if you are doing regular invoices, let's say for maintenance charges where it is identical a wording and all you're doing is changing the month, you might be better off doing what's called a repeating sales invoice. So under sales invoices, you have got the ability to set up repeating invoices, and they will be created. So that's under invoice, repeating, and effectively you type in the same stuff you normally would for a sales invoice. There's just a bit more to add, which is how often do you want to repeat it and when does it stop? And that will crop up as a draft invoice unless you say differently, and you then get to just approve it and click the button to send it. But that can save a lot of time as well, just having repeating invoices in there. You've also got the ability under contacts. So as well as just being a basic list of your contacts, which can be quite handy because it's got all the history within it, there's also some features within those contacts to basically set up some defaults. So to save time, and I would suggest this might look like a thing that wastes your time to start with, you can actually go into the client and start to set up defaults so that you don't have to enter it each time. So you can start to set up what is the default code it's going to go to. So if the sales code is always going to go to a specific code, you can put that in here to save you selecting it each time. If it's a bill, then you can basically, for example, under the contact business vision, you could set up a default that says accountancy. You can still change it at the actual point of entry, but it defaults to that to save time. If you're using Northeast, Southwest regions, you can actually set a default for that if you know it's always going to be the same. You can set up default VAT rates. We see a lot of errors where the same contact has different VAT rates entered, and some of them will be wrong, well, you can get around that problem by going, yes, that person always charges us VAT. You can set up things like credit limits, standard discounts. You can set up standard due dates. So if they're not the normal, you can set them up. And if you've selected an invoice template, you can actually say that that invoice applies to them. So if you want very orange invoice to go to this customer, you don't need to select it at the time of creating the invoice. Xero will know because you've set the default up. So do look at that, because that can save a huge amount of time. I think people are put off by the fact that it takes a few minutes to set them up, but once it's done, it's done. You only need to do it once for each contact. A couple other bits. I know I'm rattling through this quite quickly. Hopefully you can see roughly where I'm going within Xero, but as with all of these things, do put in questions if anything doesn't make complete sense, or by all means contact me outside this webinar. Be only too pleased to try and give you more specific advice if this isn't being gone into in enough detail. I'm trying to get through as many quick points so you understand what's there, but I know at the same time we won't be able to spend 5 minutes on each one. So next one is the file facility. So under settings, or just above settings, is a file facility, and really that's just a document management system using somebody else's storage space. So if you use, I don't know, Sky Storage or whatever, this is probably a cheaper way to do it. And it doesn't have to be just for financial information. So you can have as many folders as you like, and you can bring in as many files or documents and file them in those folders as you wish. Obviously, you could put your holiday photos in there, but you'd need to be a bit wary that that might be visible to more than just you and immediate family. But in theory, you can do that. For most people, the things they might file there would be any technical specifications for quotes, any technical drawings, any letters or communication documents, etc., any detailed quotes that might run to 5 pages, or copies of bills, it can all be stored there. Also bear in mind that with files, you have a specific email address for your business. So this is the one for demo business, but you can go into this space and find your own. And that means if you email anything to that email address, it will end up in here, which will be basically the top file, and then you can move it to individual folders if you wish to, or it can just stay there. So again, that's a very good storage system that is completely free within Xero, and an easy way to get things emailed into it. The other thing you can do in terms of attaching documents is, let's say I'm entering a bill that I've been sent, and I can enter in all the details, but this little file symbol is where you can store documents that don't sit in the general file place I've just shown you, but they actually are sitting within the transaction. So I can now, for that transaction, I can add anything from my computer or upload it or drag and drop it. And every time I open that transaction, I'll be able to see by clicking on that little envelope folder anything that I wanted to attach to that. So for bills, it's quite likely that's going to be a copy of the actual bill, because that will be handy. For paperless offices, it means the VAT office will accept seeing a bill there, so you don't need to keep copies of the bills in folders around the office. You can bin them. As long as they're in Xero, they're being saved on somebody else's hard drive, and you can see them going back to year dot. But it can be other things as well. So if you've got, again, like a 50-page quote that relates to that bill, then you can attach that. If you've got a service agreement, you can attach that. You can have as many attachments on one transaction as you like. Having said that, a popular way now that would happen automatically with bills is to use an add-on where there are at least 2 programs where you can scan or send bills to a third-party program. They will read it automatically, so they'll use optical character recognition to read the invoice and everything on it, so you don't have to do that, and it will populate all the fields in Xero for you. So effectively, with a quick scan or a photocopy on your mobile phone, you can get a bill straight into Xero as already entered with accurate data, because it's read by a computer, ready to show and pay without very little human interaction. And that is proving to be almost 100% accurate. And I would suggest that human beings aren't that close, because what will often happen in January 22 is that a lot of bills will still be entered as January 21 and so on. So the two main programs that do that are Receipt Bank, which I think is probably the best. We use it for our own client bookkeeping. The only problem with it is it does get charged. So I think the top charge is £25 per month, but there can be lower levels. But actually Xero has bought out a company that does it, and it's free, and that's called HubDoc, and you can access this here. If that isn't showing, we can get it for you if we're actually paying your Xero subscription. And that does what Receipt Bank does. I don't think it's as good, but it does all the basics perfectly well, and that's completely free within your Xero subscription. So you could get all your bills just being scanned into HubDoc, either through your phone or by email or whatever, and HubDoc will read it automatically, push it to the appropriate place in Xero without hardly any human interaction. And given that it probably takes a minimum of 3 minutes to enter a bill if you're a human, that means you can only do 20 an hour. HubDoc and Receipt Bank will probably get, hundreds, if not thousands in within that time. And they'll be pretty much picture perfect. And the big benefit is if you do that, they will automatically be pushed into this little folder so that whenever you go into that transaction, you can actually see the bill as it was. So if you want to know more about that, that's a big popular way of doing stuff. So let's just look at the benefit of Xero being what I would call open source. So the big benefit of cloud programs now is that the behind the scenes structure is available to other parties, and Xero is certainly openly lending itself to those third parties. They are policing it and they are recommending certain ones, and that can be found under the App Store. And within that, there are, certainly last time I looked, about 700 different apps that all link up to Xero, some better than others, but they've all been effectively approved to some extent by Xero as Xero app programs, a bit like your Sky app and Apple apps and stuff like that. Very similar process. And if you go into there, I won't go in now, but if you go into there, you can search the 600 or 700 apps either by your industry type. So if you're a hairdressing salon, you can put that in and it will find stuff that hairdressing salons might use. You could put in what you want it to do. So you might go credit card facilities, and all the credit card facility apps will crop up, or debt collecting or whatever. So have a look through that and just see what might be used. There is an argument, I think, with apps that certainly any business other than a very small one probably ought to be using about 3 or 4 of those to help things move better in their business. And we aren't fully trained on every one of the 700, but we're familiar with a lot of them. We know what they do, and we also know people who are using them often, so we can certainly give detailed guidance. And that's becoming known as what's called an app stack. So a lot of businesses will have an app stack, which is what apps do you use in your business. And I say typically 3 to 4, is becoming the bare minimum these days. Those apps also allowed, as I said, debt collecting to take place in a lot more detail than the basic stuff in Xero. There are many companies that do credit card collection. So the days of having businesses with tills is pretty much going, because you can have an iPad or a basic machine that links up through the app to Xero, does everything that your till used to do, and a lot cheaper. You can collect money by direct debit. So we use this to collect fees. Go Cardless can collect direct debits, which is very hard to do if you're a small business, because banks won't give you access to direct debit facilities, but you're allowed to get Go Cardless to pull the money from somebody else's bank account if it's in funds. And that can be quite useful, certainly if you're getting paid regularly on a monthly basis as we are. So have a look at those. And that sort of leads us lastly into what do we as accountants do with apps, because we use a lot, not only just in our business for our business sakes, but also for clients. I'll just run through a few of those so that if you are a client or want to become a client and you're not getting these facilities, there's certainly things we can help with. Raising finance, so we have a very good relationship with an online platform called Capitalize, which pretty much has the whole of the marketplace in terms of lending available, and they will link into a client's Xero, get a credit score based on that information and other information available elsewhere, and come up with particular finance companies that would be prepared to lend, how much they'd be prepared to lend, and how it would work. It also has the facility to collect old and bad debts that have been written off. There's a debt collecting program that is paid on a success only basis. And that covers everything from developing properties to buying commercial properties to, just general cash flow or whatever. The only thing it doesn't do is personal mortgages. It will do buy-to-let mortgages, but not your normal house residential mortgages. We have a piece of software we're looking at now that will interrogate your Xero and come up with suggestions of ways you might be able to reduce your overhead. So it will shop around for the best phone, the best gas, and give you a report. You don't have to act on it, but that's certainly possible now. We use software called Fathom, which will interrogate your data and allow us to give you a better insight into what's happening, because it will interrogate all the things going on, trends, and so on, and give us knowledge that we as accountants understand, and we can then work that through with you. That software also allows us to do very, very comprehensive business plans, so cash flow forecasts, profit forecasts, that can then link to your Xero, so we can then produce reports that say this is how last month went compared to your budget, and we can get great insights into that. And that's handy for getting finance or keeping your bank happy or knowing where you're heading. I don't think enough businesses do cash flow forecasts, probably because they're so complicated, but that can be really powerful. So that's available. We use a piece of software called Xavier, which interrogates your Xero for accuracy. So we use that when we do year-end accounts and bookkeeping, and that will tell us loads of things that might be going wrong within your bookkeeping, whether the VAT might be wrong, whether there might be a duplicate invoice in there by mistake, etc., etc. So there's about 40 or 50 things it looks for that helps us identify very quickly, because we wouldn't have time to do it within our normal accountancy fee budget. And we use that for data accuracy. And some of you, if your clients, will have seen us present those reports to you to help you go through. Some of them are to save time, some of them are to avoid errors. We use, as I say, Capitalize. We also use for debt collecting, and we use a company called Clarity to identify the 7 key numbers in running your business. Sometimes we and accountants are guilty of presenting too many numbers and bombarding you with stuff. So we're concentrating on 7 key numbers. We can look at those and go, what would happen to your business if they improved by, say, 5%? And we can see what the potential is, and then we can sit down and work through a business plan on how to do that, get you to put your own percentages in it, and come up with a plan on how to grow. And that's just a few things we use. We're looking at loads of others. We're looking at one that we haven't started yet, where we may be able to actually pull a list of people to pay from your software and then put that into a program. And all you do is click a couple of things to log into your bank and those payments go. So that will help us with paying employees through the payroll system, or suppliers, on a monthly or bi-monthly basis and stuff like that. So that's pretty much it. I've rattled through that. And as I say, hopefully there'll be a few things in there that you want to go back and look at again, maybe in a bit more detail. But hopefully, I say, that's sort of got you where you need to get to for the moment. So next steps, as always, it's important with these webinars that you then just crack on and do something. Hopefully there's a few things in there that you will commit to doing or getting your team to help with. And as I say, if some of those look useful, but you're not quite getting your head around it, please feel free to contact me. Best way to do that is support@marklawson, marklawson.co.uk, and we'll try and come back to you as quick as possible. Keep up to date with Xero changes. Xero's got a great help facility in the background, and also it tells you new things that are coming along. Xero makes about 1,000 changes every year. A lot of them just happen in the background. Some of them aren't particularly useful. They're just correcting bugs or whatever, but that's continuously happening because it's online. So keep up to date with what new stuff's there. We will try and do some future webinars that present those to you, but best if you find it monthly, and look at new apps coming along as well. Retrain on Xero, if you've suddenly got the impression from today that you or your team simply don't know enough about Xero, we have bespoke training programs that will go through whatever you want to achieve from whatever level you're already at, even if that's from ground up. And as I say, get help from us wherever you can. I've just got a quick couple of minutes to see if I've got any questions there. Yeah, there's only one there. Just quickly read through that. If I give my team access to Xero, are they able to see and change everything? No, the answer is there are user-defined levels for Xero. So at a basic level, if they're employees, they can see things like their pay slips and P60s, but nothing more. There are other levels where they can just enter basic information like sales invoices and so on. And then at top management level, you can see everything, bank statements, bank balances, profit and loss, and the whole lot. So there are different levels, and there is a report, I think, in the Xero help that will tell you what those levels are, or we can as well. So I think we're pretty much just about up to the hour there. So I say, hopefully, even though that's been gone through at some pace, that there's enough in there for you to at least find a few things that you might want to revisit or find out more about and use within your business. Any problems or questions, by all means, contact myself or one of the team at the support at stuff. And appreciate you attending today, and thank you for your time. As always, there'll be another webinar cropping up in March sometime, so we'll make sure you get invites to that. Not entirely sure what the subject matter is going to be at this stage, but we may well make it about cash flow and raising finance in businesses. I think there's still quite a need post-COVID, and obviously there are other things happening to make this year likely to be just as weird as the last two. So we can look at that. That might be the one, but I'll keep you informed. But for the moment, many thanks for your time today. Hope you found it useful and hope to speak to you soon. Thank you.